Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where I have discovered a movie I am very excited to share with you. But first off, we have another giveaway opportunity from our friends at Dolby Atmos. The Age of Adaline just came out on Blu-ray yesterday, and Dolby Atmos is very proud to have used their technology to not only mix the sound for the theatrical release, but for this Blu-ray as well. This is the Blake Lively Harrison Ford movie that came out over the summer. It is about a woman who discovers that through a freak accident she is immortal. So I thought we'd do something a little bit different with the challenge this time around for the chance for you to win one of 3 Blu-ray copies of this movie. So if you would like a Blu-ray copy of The Age of Adaline, courtesy again of our friends at Dolby Atmos, here's what you have to do. You have until the end of the day, Sunday, to tweet me and Dolby Atmos to be officially entered. You have to have in your tweet at Grace Randolph, so I see it, and the hashtag Dolby Atmos. And then with the rest of your tweet, please tell us what you would do if you suddenly discovered that you were immortal. And the best 3 answers will not only win a copy of that Blu-ray, but will be read out loud here on Morning Movie News Monday morning. So good luck entering. I always have fun with your entries. And again, you have until the end of the day, Sunday, to get those in. And I'll be sure to remind you. All right, so let's move on to the 3 stories of the day. And as I said, I've discovered a movie. I was looking, and I think this is going to be actually something a lot of people are talking about, and I'm actually really surprised that it's not on more people's radars already. Whoever's doing the PR for this movie, maybe they want to keep it under wraps until it's sold to a distributor, but I'm surprised they've been able to keep it under wraps. So anyway, this is a film that inexplicably is going to be shopped around at the Toronto Film Festival. So I was looking at the upcoming festival slate and seeing which movies were generating some heat. And one of the things people were talking about or are talking about are the movies that don't have distributors yet. I mean, typically we look at these festivals as debut or campaign stops. They debut at one festival and then they make the rounds at the others for award season, right? It really is like campaigning for political office. We call these awards campaigns, in fact, and this is kind of like a movie gets on a little campaign bus and goes from festival to festival trying to win people over and get the press it needs to woo over the voters for said award shows. But anyway, another reason that festivals are used are to get distributors to purchase an independent film. So there are a couple of films going to Toronto that don't yet have a distributor. Now this film is not an awards contender. I mean, maybe it will be. It could go the way of something like Pulp Fiction because it's very inventive. And in fact, the director is a punk rocker in Russia who's being at least sold as Russia's Quentin Tarantino. And on a side note, Quentin Tarantino recently did an interview in New York Magazine, not the current issue, but the one with Samuel L. Jackson on the cover, their fall preview, which I subscribe to New York Magazine on my iPad. Fantastic subscription. I only have 2 subscriptions on my iPad, New York Magazine and Vanity Fair, and I love them both. I couldn't recommend them highly enough. And they're very competitively priced because they're digital versions. Maybe not Vanity Fair, but I know that, well, both. It's like buying the magazine. It's just a digital copy of it, and it just comes right to your iPad. I really, really enjoy both of them, and the content cannot be beat. Except, of course, by Beyond the Trailer. No, but there's lots of great content out there, and this is one source. So that interview is something you should definitely check out. It's really a very honest interview, and I thought Quentin Tarantino came across quite well, even though he was being very honest. So anyway, back to this movie. The name of the director is Ilya Naishuller. So if you're a Russian BTT viewer, I'd be curious, have you heard of him? How popular is he in Russia? But he's getting into directing. And he has this movie called Hardcore, and they actually have a sample trailer or clip from the movie, which I'm putting a link to down below in the video description. So what is it? It is a movie that's shot like a video game first-person shooter. So the entire movie is from the perspective of our main character, which I think is just absolutely brilliant. It's just so clever especially with video game movies. I mean, it's timed perfectly because it's going to come out once it gets a distributor, right when all these video game movies are hitting theaters. So it'll be right there in the thick of things in the first wave, no less, before this wave either fails or gets too crowded. But the really smart thing when you watch the trailer or the clip that I've put a link to down below is that it's like really low tech, and so it's somebody clearly acting out a first-person shooter. And so the way the dialogue is done is to give you, like, the player tips on how to get through each obstacle, or in this case, this one shootout. So it's really hilarious. And then adding to that is that Sharlto Copley is in this teaser trailer and will be in the movie. And he's like, you're in this like modern kind of setting, and the individual that you're playing is like, looks like the body of like your average gamer. Although many people would argue what is an average gamer these days. A lot of talk about who's actually playing games and if who's trying to push other people out of the gaming community. But anyway, it's like this almost a little bit like Eggsy pre-Kingsman, right? But you can't see the person's face because, of course, that's you. But then Sharlto Copley's like this old British soldier who's like, like cheerio, but he's giving you tips on how to like blow people away with an automatic rifle and using grenades, hand grenades. Sharlto Copley, sometimes I think he's hit or miss, admittedly, but when he hits on target and he hits strong. And I really also appreciate his willingness to try interesting and new things. I mean, I loved him in Chappie. He broke my heart as Chappie, and he wasn't even on screen. It was just, motion capture and voice work. But he's a really talented actor. I loved him in District 9, but I thought he had a real miss in Elysium. Although I know some people really liked him in that role, but I think he created a character that was despicable, but forgot to make him magnetic. But anyway, someone else in the movie besides Sharlto Copley is Danila, let me see, I have the full name here, Kozlovsky. And you might remember that I've been singing Danila Kozlovsky's praises since I saw Vampire Academy, a movie which I said nobody should watch except for casting directors, particularly from Marvel and DC. But nobody's picked this guy up yet. He's a big star in Russia, a big heartthrob. I would liken him to Russia's Tom Hardy. And I feel he could be as successful as Tom Hardy if he could only get a genuine chance here. And he's the villain in this piece, who, get this, has telekinetic powers, and who you have to fight as the first player in this movie/game. Now, I'm curious to see how people feel, watching a first-person shooter that they don't control. But I think the humor will come from the way they act it out. Live action. It's not a video game. It's not animated. And I think as convincing as video game animation is, it's still not live action. And with some of the loopiness that they're injecting here, I think that's very clever. So I'm absolutely in love with this. I would definitely watch it, and I think we should definitely keep an eye out for hardcore and all the talent involved. If this can help Sharlto Copley's career and finally put Danila Kozlovsky on the map, and this director Ilya Naishuller, fantastic. And Russia, of course, is doing very well. In the film, in Hollywood, it's one of the top box offices outside of China, of course. No one can compete with China's population, but Russia and Mexico are very highly regarded in terms of box office receipts. And we've seen a lot of talent come from Mexico, but really so far we've really only had Timur Bekmambetov from Russia, but I think we need more talent from that region. So anyway, very exciting, and I highly recommend you watch that clip. All right, so the next story of the day has to do with Christopher Nolan, who's able to make headlines just by booking a release date. Yes, he has set his next film for 2017. That is quite a ways off. That's 3 years after Interstellar. And I think maybe he needs the time to cleanse people's palate, because while I liked the first 2/3 of Interstellar quite a bit, I think the last third went off the rails, and also unfortunately opened up the film, I think, for some ridicule and, good-natured ribbing. But, Christopher Nolan's supposed to be like, Christopher Nolan, you're not supposed to rib such an artiste, right? But anyway, Interstellar, we'll talk about that more in a moment, but let's just talk about the positioning of this film. It's for Warner Brothers again, so Warner Brothers has maintained their relationship with Nolan. I think that's very interesting, considering the fact that Legendary has gone to Universal, so that Nolan would stay loyal to Warner Brothers over Legendary. I think is a fascinating choice from him. You would think he would go with Legendary, but he's stuck with the studio. And Jeff Robinov isn't even there anymore, but maybe perhaps Warner Brothers offered him a very lucrative deal. Warner Brothers is very aggressive in securing in-house talent. I think probably the studio outside of Sony's relationship with Adam Sandler, which of course, as we all know, is on the rocks. But Warner Brothers is the closest, I think, to the old school studio system of anyone. You know, for instance, Ben Affleck is their guy, and that's one of the reasons they made him Batman. But anyway, Christopher Nolan, so his film is set for July 21st, 2017, and that's usually when his Batman movies hit theaters. So that's a pretty familiar release date for him. And he's going up against Pitch Perfect 3, but, you know, we shouldn't laugh at that, because Pitch Perfect 2 made $285 million worldwide. That's no Interstellar, but that's still nothing to laugh at. And also a Fox animated film, which could also be a very strong competitor. And especially if, Nolan wants to go the all-ages route, which he should if you really want to go for a major box office. But then also, in terms of, what's coming out the week before and after, the new Planet of the Apes, the third installment, will come out the week before, and then the Sony Marvel Spider-Man reboot with Tom Holland will come out the week after. I think that's too much of a question mark to be something to be too worried about now, but it could be. But that's nothing new for summer. You have one weekend to really make your mark before another movie just, comes crashing in. So as for Christopher Nolan, we've had a little bit of a debate as to whether or not Interstellar was a solid hit for him or a strong win. I felt it was solid, but also I think overall a little bit of a disappointment because it wasn't an awards contender. Inception, awards contender. I have his box office numbers up here. It made $825 million worldwide. Inception, coming pretty darn close to his Dark Knight movies, which both joined the $1 billion club. Batman Begins, of course, did not, but that wasn't really when Nolan hit his stride and became the Nolan we know today. A name filmmaker, almost up there with Steven Spielberg. Even more so, I think the loyalty to Nolan from fans is really impressive, and I don't know any other director that I think enjoys that to the extent that he does. Maybe George Miller post Mad Max, but I think George Miller needs to prove himself, because the comics for Mad Max were horrible, and this is the most interesting thing George Miller's ever done, so it might be a one-hit wonder. But so I think that he has the most, the likelihood to follow in Nolan's footsteps. But anyway, right now, Nolan's in a class of his own. So you can imagine that with Interstellar, it was a disappointment, especially when Warner Brothers and Paramount split distribution duties on that, and Warner Brothers gave up quite a bit, with their Legendary deal. They said Legendary could bow out of the DC movies in exchange for a piece of the Interstellar pie, and of course, there wasn't much pie to go around. Now, I'm sure as many of you will say, $675 million worldwide is very impressive. I mean, Mad Max wishes it had that kind of gross. But still, for Nolan, it's a considerable backslide from where he was. It didn't come right after The Dark Knight, which I'm sure benefited Inception, but still, it's about, obviously about $350 million behind his Dark Knight movies, and around, $150 million behind Inception. So you want to stop that backward momentum, and you want to get back up to the higher numbers. So whatever Nolan's doing, I hope that it's a little bit more commercially friendly. I'd be like, I'm glad your science was sound. Someone the other day, I was reading an article talking about how Interstellar had fantastic science. I think it was actually Mythbusters were talking about the fact that while they think the science is more sound in Interstellar, they actually preferred Gravity. I would be vice versa. I thought Interstellar was a better movie than Gravity. As you know, I had major problems with Gravity's story, although of course the visual effects were astounding. But anyway, I think that Interstellar also, of course, as I mentioned, failed to be a big awards contender. And that was something they really were relying on. And so I feel that, whatever movie Nolan is making, I would wager that he's not going to have the creative freedom that he had with Interstellar. If I were Warner Brothers, I would say, I love you, Nolan. Here's a nice big fat paycheck. I want you to make the movie you want to make, but we're going to have notes. And I think that every director, movie making is a team business, as I often say, and I think it's a mistake to write off the contributions of those that you collaborate with, even the studio suits. But I do feel that Warner Brothers, as I've said, let down George Miller by not helping him make a more commercially viable film. And I think it was crucial that movie be rated PG-13. Although I don't know why it wasn't rated PG-13. I guess for some kind of concepts, but I mean, I'm like, do you know what they show to kids these days? It's fine, considering some of the other stuff that's out there. But anyway, I think that Mad Max could have been a little bit more competitive from a business perspective without hurting the quality of the film. And that falls on Warner Brothers, in my opinion. So I think that Nolan needs notes, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets them. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is about Star Wars: The Force Awakens, which we had anticipated as being a day-and-date release worldwide, and for the most part, it is. But we're starting to find out about some notable exceptions. Now, it comes out most places December 18th, but lo and behold, Europe and the United Arab Emirates are getting it early. The United Arab Emirates actually gets it first, just a few days early on December 15th, and then France and Italy and a couple of other European countries get it on the 16th, and England gets it a day earlier on the 17th. We've been talking about social media. We just talked about that right before the Labor Day holiday, about how social media is becoming a real pain in the butt for Hollywood, with bad word of mouth traveling with lightning speed. Star Wars, if I were Disney, I would have stuck to my guns and done a day and date release. But I mean, I guess there'll be press screenings, etc., so they can't hide it if it's bad. But you want to try and hide some of the twists. But you better believe with a movie like this, people will be trying to spoil it. As we all know, if anyone who goes on the internet, regularly, people like to go in there and put spoilers all the time. So I'm curious, if you're in one of those countries, what do you think of getting it a day early? And what do you think of Disney blinking a little bit and releasing it not exactly day and date as originally we had all anticipated? Also, Morocco and Egypt are the only two countries that don't get it until January, with the exception of China, which doesn't get it until the end of January. Although, as I recall, that's either during or right after their big movie-going season. I think for their big movie-going season, they don't like to really have any U.S. releases come out then, so it's going to probably come in right after that. But January isn't a bad release date when it comes to China, so that could actually work in Star Wars' favor. But China often gets movies way later than the United States and the rest of the world because they're so strict on when movies can be released. They want to position them, they want to favor their local films, etc. And, as we discussed yesterday, sometimes give the box office to local propaganda. It's crazy over there. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention just really quickly is people were talking about Star Wars having special 3D glasses, like so many films have recently. But I have to tell you, I have never ever seen these special 3D glasses anywhere. And I'm curious, how many of you have seen them? It's like those really cool cups that some of you tweet me pictures of, where there's like an awesome cup with a little figure on top, and they've talked about the fact that they're surprised at movie theaters that adults buy these. I'm not surprised. I don't think any adult fan of comic book movies would be surprised. But I would like to buy them, but they are not made available to me. So I'm curious, how much of this movie swag is at your local theater, and do you purchase it? And do you keep it? I think I would keep the cups, but I don't think I would spend the money on the 3D glasses, because I also would worry that it would hinder my viewing of the film, and I would just be a little bit too nervous about that. But I guess I could buy them and pocket them, but I'm just curious, if these are available to you, what do you prefer? The cups, the special 3D glasses, or both, or neither. All right, so thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Morning Movie News. Please let me know down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, anything you'd like us to cover tomorrow, any questions that you might have, and of course, don't forget to enter for that chance to win an Age of Adaline Blu-ray. There are 3 that we have to give away, and I'll be picking those one-sentence reviews once they're all in at the end of the day, Sunday. Thanks for watching. Bye.